Welcome back to the Gilded Heiresses. I'm your host, Julie Montague, Countess of Sandwich and Gilded Age historian. And today, we're taking to the high seas to explore how Gilded Age heiresses traveled. Before the age of steamships, crossing the Atlantic was a grueling affair. Sailing ships depended on the whims of the wind and weather, meaning a journey from New York to Southampton could take anywhere from 3 weeks to over 2 months. All that changed in the mid-19th century, however, when steam power revolutionized ocean travel. The introduction of iron hulls and screw propellers meant ships could travel faster, safer, and more predictably. By the 1860s and 1870s, transatlantic travel was not only feasible for the elite, it was fashionable too. Steamships cut journey times to about 8 or 9 days, and by the turn of the century, record-breaking ships like Cunard's Mauretania were doing it in as little as 4.5 days. Suddenly, the world had grown smaller, and for Gilded Age heiresses, that meant the opportunity to travel frequently and fabulously. With this new technology came a whole new level of luxury. Steamships, like those operated by Cunard and White Star Line, were marvels of engineering and elegance. The SS Servia, launched in 1881, was one of the first liners built of steel and among the earliest to be outfitted with electric lights. These ships were no longer just means of transport. They were floating hotels, complete with grand dining salons, libraries, smoking rooms, music lounges, and promenades. Lavish interiors were designed by the same architects who built the grand hotels and mansions of the Gilded Age, often in Beaux Art or neoclassical style. Passengers in first class had access to private suites, silver service dining, and even floral arrangements delivered to their rooms. It was a world away from the dark and dirty steerage decks below. And for the heiresses of the day, booking a transatlantic ticket quickly became as much of a social event as a travel arrangement. On board, the social calendar was just as packed as any London season or Newport summer. There were teas, dinners, games, and endless promenades. And socializing wasn't just encouraged, it was expected. For young debutantes making their first trip to Europe, the voyage itself was a sort of floating debutante ball. It was a chance to network, to be seen, and to cement one's status among fellow elites before even setting foot in a European capital. Ships often carried members of the New York's infamous 400, foreign dignitaries, wealthy industrialists, and titled Europeans, all who mingled together in the boat's opulent salons. For many American heiresses, a steamship crossing marked the beginning of a new life, often in a new country, and sometimes as a newly minted member of the European aristocracy. These dollar princesses often made their way across the Atlantic with trunks of couture, jewel cases, memories of home, and sometimes even a watchful mother at their shoulder, keen on ensuring a favorable match at all costs. Thus, every moment aboard was carefully curated. Where you dined, who you sat with, how you dressed on deck, all sent signals about your status, breeding, and social ambitions. By the 1890s, steamship companies weren't just competing on comfort, they were racing each other for speed too. The Blue Riband was an unofficial accolade awarded to the fastest transatlantic crossing, and ships like the Lucania, Campania, and later the Mauretania all vied for the title. But speed mattered to the passengers too. For elite women with social calendars packed on both sides of the Atlantic, faster crossings meant more balls, more shopping, and more operas. And just as importantly, it meant the bragging rights of having traveled aboard the latest, greatest, and fastest liner. To travel on the Mauretania, or Lusitania, was to place oneself at the cutting edge of luxury, technology, and wealth. Of course, travel still had its discomforts. Even the finest ships rocked and rolled in rough seas, and seasickness was an unfortunate reality for many. But elite passengers were buffered from the worst of it by attentive stewards, comfortable lounges, and a steady supply of champagne. Cunard ships introduced flushing toilets as early as 1870 and used the latest in heating and ventilation systems to keep their wealthiest guests comfortable. Women brought maids and gentlemen brought valets, ensuring that one's appearance was impeccable even at sea. By the dawn of the 20th century, steamships had transformed transatlantic travel from a regrettable necessity that took weeks to complete to a mini social season entirely localized on the deck of a luxury liner. For the heiresses of the Gilded Age, these voyages offered freedom from their day-to-day routines, the chance to be seen by those who mattered, and the opportunity to cross more than just oceans. They crossed class lines, cultures, and continents, forging new identities with every mile. And in doing so, they didn't just board ships, they made waves. Thanks for joining me for this voyage on the Gilded Heiresses.